Hello, okay, for those of you returning to the channel, welcome back, and for those of you that are new here, that have just stumbled upon this video, then thank you for joining me. And if you find yourself wanting to stick around to follow just some random Welsh geek ramble on about film and TV, then please hit that subscribe button, it will mean an awful lot to me. And yeah, welcome to my spoiler-free review of one of my anticipated movies of the year, and that is Disclosure Day, directed by Steven Spielberg from a screenplay by David Koepp, based on a story by Spielberg. And yeah, I've been incredibly excited for this. Spielberg is one of my favourite directors of all time. You know, so many of his movies that I grew up with just fueled my love. I mean, they gave birth to my love for film, really. And, you know, it's just excited to have him returning to Aliens. You know, I absolutely admire E.T. and Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and I really liked his adaptation of War of the Worlds. So yeah, I was really excited for this. So, Disclosure Day. The film follows Daniel Kellner, a cybersecurity expert, and meteorologist Margaret Fairchild. They uncover evidence that governments have been hiding proof of extraterrestrial life for decades. As they race to reveal the truth to the world, they are pursued by powerful agencies and corporate interests determined to keep the secret buried. So let's start with the performances. Both Emily Blunt and Josh O'Connor are superb here. I admired in how they brought their characters to life. It really allowed me to kind of buy into the situation in which these characters find themselves in. You know, everyone else is also superb here. Colin Firth as the head of this secret agency that are trying to keep these secrets under wrap. He's also superb here. And you've also got a Coleman Domingo who plays a Hugo, another whistleblower here, and he is also superb. I'm really liking what this actor is doing recently. I first discovered him in the Running Man remake, and for me he was the highlight in that movie, and it was his addition to the cast here was one of the many aspects about Disclosure Day that got me really excited for it, because I think he's such a charismatic actor, and there's just something about how he brings his characters to life that I find really mesmerising about him, and he's absolutely amazing here as a Hugo Wakefield. And then this is all aided by what I thought was quite a clever screenplay, because what David Koepp, I felt, achieved with the screenplay here was introduce us to characters where we can instantly get on board with. You know, I can instantly get on board, you know, with the journey in which they're on and believe in the characters as well. You know, there is enough there within the writing for us to understand who these people are to a certain degree. Like, it's not incredibly in-depth or anything, but you understand, you know, the type of people that they are. You know, you sort of get the personalities. And yes, a lot of that is then brought to life by the superb performances from both Josh O'Connor and Emily Blunt. But I think the writing is very clever here in sort of allowing us to really get to understand who these characters are and get on board with their journeys, because the film kind of throws you straight into the action, and I really like that. But that could have easily have become an issue when it came to who these characters are, and the fact that we've got to become invested in their journeys. You know, we have to be invested with their stories. And I just feel like the way in which they sort of propel us into the story, along with that kind of very clever, tight screenplay that allows us to get some sort of insight into who these people are and to allow their personalities to come through, not only through the performances but through the writing, I thought was incredibly clever. And for me personally, Disclosure Day felt very much like a classic Spielberg film, which I absolutely loved. Whether that be because you've got long-time collaborator Janusz Kaminski, I think that's how you pronounce the name, returning here with the cinematography. I mean, the film looked gorgeous, but it just sort of really transported me back to 90s Spielberg movies, especially with the way in which the narrative is structured and with how it plays out and with how we are introduced to its characters and how the characters are set up in such a way that is kind of chaotic but also very natural and organic. So sort of then in turn allowing me to sort of really kind of just buy into who these characters are and be immersed within their journeys and sort of buy into their journeys. You know, it just had a very sort of 90s aesthetic to it, and it's shot on 35mm, which just gives the experience that grit that I felt like it really needed, and kind of really just elevates the experience even more, because, you know, there is it's a science fiction and you could say supernatural element maybe to the story, and I think it's very important with stories like this to have that element of groundedness to it for you to really kind of buy into what is occurring here. And Spielberg achieves that in classic Spielberg style, and I loved it. Just from a technical perspective in how the movie looked visually, the sound design, the gorgeous score by John Williams. I mean, he never fails, John Williams, and again, he gives us something incredibly magical, when it comes to the soundtrack. But all the kind of different elements just really sort of transported me back to a time that just reminded me why I fell in love with film. This was one of those experiences where there was a nostalgic element to it. That's not me saying that I wasn't 100% on board with every sort of creative decision that was made on this film in how they brought certain elements to life. There were some decisions made that kind of made me wince and sort of go, why did we do that? And I'm going to try and be really vague here because this is spoiler free, but there are moments where they just use CGI and it's quite a simple shot. It's a very powerful moment, but it's a moment that I felt like would have just been sort of elevated even more if perhaps they'd gone more down the practical effects route, and I just don't understand why they didn't in those moments. And maybe I'll sort of touch on that a little bit more in my live stream later this evening, where I may dive a little bit more into the spoilers with Disclosure Day. And then I suppose that can lead me into some of the gripes that I did have with this, because this wasn't a perfect experience for me. I really liked it. I really had a good time with this movie. I really enjoyed it, but there were certain aspects or elements about it that kind of really stopped me from falling in love with it, you could say. I admired many different aspects, from a technical perspective when it came to this movie, but as a whole, as an overall experience, there were issues that I had with it, mainly with how the story evolved going into the second act and then sort of evolving into the third act. It kind of staggered. So, for example, the movie begins where it sort of throws you into the action and the pace is just spot on, just from the way in which they balance introducing us to the characters to sort of giving us insight into what is happening within the story and sort of why this agency are after these characters and all of that. I mean, it balances all those different elements within the story really well within the first 20 to 30 minutes. But then it kind of just staggers during the sort of the middle portion of the film. It almost felt like they weren't quite sure where they wanted to go with this story, with these characters. And then it sort of picks up again then in the third act. And sort of one of the major gripes that I had with it was it kind of doesn't really focus that much on sort of the human story when it comes to these individual characters, like Josh O'Connor's character or Emily Blunt's and Colin Firth's character, where, it does give us a little bit of insight because, Colin Firth's character here is supposed to be the main villain, and you do get some insight into his past and what's maybe driving him in that. But for me, I kind of wanted just a little bit more meat. In many ways, it still works, it's still effective, but I just found myself wanting a little bit more insight into that human story, or a bit more of a focus on that human story with these characters. Same goes for Colman Domingo's character. Again, superb performance. I love what he's doing. He says so much about his character, through how his character is brought to life through the performance. And in many ways, I suppose that is enough. That was effective, but I still kind of wanted to know a little bit more. And the film does such a wonderful job at setting these characters up within the first act. Like I said, it's aided by the wonderful performances and the very clever writing here, but I just couldn't end up but feel like there wasn't enough insight into who these characters really were and what was really driving them. Like, we get a basic understanding, which again, I think, you know, it's done pretty well, but I felt like how their journeys evolve and where they sort of end up within by the time the movie concludes, I felt like it was kind of really lacking overall a weight when it came to sort of the characters' journeys and their story. It just, for me personally, lacked an emotional weight when it came to these characters' journeys. But I still found Disclosure Day to be quite an emotional experience. And a lot of that's for my own sort of personal reasons and kind of my own personal beliefs, and just how it kind of really does a really good job at conveying the world that we're in right now, and sort of the importance of, you know, finding out this information, the fact that we may not be alone in the universe, and sort of how we may deal with the effects of that, and how that kind of plays into religion and the potential breakdown of society. Where it sort of lacks for me with the emotional weight behind his character's journey, it sort of makes up for in how it conveys sort of the impact of what is potentially happening or what could happen with this information, you know, once it gets out there to the world. You know, you could feel that the world is on the brink of World War III. You could feel that the world is on the brink of destroying itself. And in a way, it was quite scary, you know, and it gave me goosebumps because it does quite effectively convey where we are right now as a world. But I think when it comes to sort of humanity overall and sort of the effects that something like, you know, releasing information like this, where we are not alone in the galaxy, and sort of the consequences of releasing this information, you know, that is felt. You feel that weight. You know, for me, one of the movie's strengths is how it really kind of clearly communicates what humanity is up against, gradually revealing the stakes in a way that really felt believable and unsettling for me. I know I felt the weight of what humanity was up against, you know, the stakes in which the humanity is up against, and sort of what the consequences could be. And I felt like Spielberg, you know, and David Koepp with the screenplay here does a really wonderful job at getting that across, I felt, for me. But then you had the sort of slight downside that I had when it came to sort of the more kind of personal journey with these characters, which is quite funny because even though I felt like the movie was lacking that emotional weight with its characters, for me personally, due to sort of how it conveyed sort of what was happening on sort of a much bigger scale here with humanity, I felt like that kind of struck me a lot more personally. And I think it's because it was kind of playing with me and sort of in what I believe personally and what I want to believe, and sort of where I sit when it comes to aliens and all of that, and just who I am as a person. I think the film does a really good job at sort of talking to you maybe as a person. Well, it did me anyway. But then I couldn't help but kind of just feel that I wanted more as well when it came to sort of these individual characters and their stories. Overall, Disclosure Day, its story kind of really resonated strongly with me. And I think it's because of how it kind of really captures and conveys the world we're in now, but also sort of how it handles sort of different themes around religion, for example, and sort of the breakdown of society and how this information can affect different individuals and all of that. And I think the way in which they do it's very cleverly done, and it's a story overall that, for me personally, really resonated with me. At the same time, I don't think it was quite perfect. I did have issues with it, but I still had a really good time with this film. It's very much, in many ways, classic Spielberg. I was getting elements of E.T. in it, in how the third act is structured. You know, there's a little bit of Close Encounters of the Third Kind in there. I'm not sure if that's intentional or not. And yeah, there are moments that gave me goosebumps. There are moments that made me tear up. And so I'm in many ways, perhaps I'm a little conflicted with the experience, because it wasn't giving me one thing, but it gave me another, which was also in a way satisfying, really, which was, it is an experience that put me on a bit of an emotional ride. But I couldn't help but feel those issues with its pacing and just sort of with its narrative during that middle half of the movie, where I feel like it does kind of stagger and sort of lose its way. And I think a lot of that was because of the lack of focus, really, with its characters and maybe what they wanted to do with its characters. And that could just be me. I really liked it. I had a really good time with it. I will probably see it a second time, actually. And so, yeah, that's enough of rambling on from me for now. I will perhaps talk a little bit more about it in my live stream later this evening on the channel. But they are my thoughts on Disclosure Day, and I will be giving Disclosure Day So yeah, they are my thoughts on Disclosure Day. But what did you guys think? I am a week late getting this review up. I was originally going to watch it last Friday, the Friday in which it was released here in the UK, and I just never got around to it. Reality's been quite hectic lately, but I finally managed to catch it yesterday morning, and so apologies, this is a late review. But yeah, have any of you guys seen it yet? What did you think? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Did you agree or disagree with anything I've said? Then please let me know in the comments below, and let's get a discussion going. And another big thank you to everyone that has been supporting the channel, wherever it be, liking, commenting, subscribing. It means the world to me, and it will always overwhelm me that so many of you do want to follow just some random Welsh geek rambling on about film and TV. As I've already previously mentioned in the video, there will be a live stream later this evening, but it's going to be an opportunity for me to talk about sort of just like random news within the world of film and TV. I recently finished watching The Boys Season 5, so I want to talk about that a little bit with you all, as well as the Masters of the Universe box office, which, I'll be honest with you, box office, when it comes to the financial side of movies, that is not something that I get overly excited or any sort of joy talking about, to be honest with you. It's one of those topics that I try not to touch on or dwell on too much, because I feel like it just, for me personally, takes away from the fun and the magic of what is cinema. But it is something that I feel like I kind of just want to touch on with you all. And it will also be an opportunity to ask me a few questions. Yeah, that's it from me for now, guys. Thank you all for watching. I really do appreciate it. I'll be catching you guys soon.